we are witnessing the war in Ukraine and the horrible toll of that war. Images continue to be published out of Ukraine depicting the gruesome impact of this war and the terrible loss. In all of this, it reminds us all of the important role that Canada can play in stepping up to provide help. We know the Ukrainians are seeking refuge and solace. Their families are trying to find safety. Canada can play a role in making sure people can come to safety, that we can support Ukrainians. And so, first and foremost, we're calling for a national plan, a plan to work with provinces and territories to make it as easy and as simple as possible for people that are leaving this horrible crisis to get to Canada safely, to be able to be welcomed in Canada. And so we're calling for that. In that call, we also want to acknowledge that there are vulnerable people, particularly vulnerable people in Ukraine, that they also have to be acknowledged. And so we need to make sure that there's a clear plan to recognize the vulnerable communities that are unable to leave or that are having trouble leaving. That's racialized people in Ukraine as well as the LGBTQ community. And secondly, we're going to continue to apply pressure for increased sanctions. We've heard there are another rounds of sanctions announced by Prime Minister today. We welcome that. We need to continue to apply as much pressure as possible on Putin where it counts the most, and that's his wealth. And that's by targeting his closely allied and associated oligarchs and targeting them, seizing and freezing their accounts. That's a meaningful way for us to apply pressure on Putin to stop this war. We saw some of the incredible stories and imagery out of neighboring countries in Germany, where people had signs saying, "We can take you in our homes. We have space for a mom and two children." That's the type of spirit that we're seeing around the world. And that's the type of spirit that exists here in Canada. People here in Canada want to welcome Ukrainians. We need to have a plan to do that. We need to have barrier-free travel. We need to make it as easy as possible. And we have with us Bodhana, who'll share her story, the feeling and the impact on Ukrainian Canadians, the fear and the worry that they have, and the willingness they have to step up and provide support, and the willingness that's shared with all Canadians to be able to step up and support. So I'll just provide some remarks in French, and then I'll pass the mic to Bodhana. Donc, ce qu'on voit en Ukraine, c'est vraiment une crise humanitaire. On voit une guerre et le taux d'une guerre. Le taux est horrible et ça montre encore la responsabilité du Canada d'offrir l'aide, de faire preuve de leadership et d'aider les gens qui essaient de quitter cette crise humanitaire. Donc, on a deux demandes aujourd'hui. Premièrement, on doit avoir un plan en travaillant avec les provinces et territoires pour aider les Ukrainiens qui quittent la violence, qui quittent la crise humanitaire. Dans ce plan, on doit aussi reconnaître qu'il y a des gens qui sont plus vulnérables. La communauté racisée, les gens racisés, aussi la communauté LGBTQ, et on doit reconnaître leur vulnérabilité. Deuxièmement, on encore exige le gouvernement de mettre en place des sanctions fermes contre les oligarques. On accueille l'annonce d'aujourd'hui d'augmenter les sanctions contre les oligarques, mais c'est un outil tellement important. On doit continuer de mettre la pression sur Poutine où il compte, et ça veut dire sa richesse. Et ça veut dire en mettant en place les sanctions sur les oligarques, les alliés de Poutine. On est aussi, aujourd'hui, on a Bodhana avec nous. Elle va partager ses inquiétudes et la peur de la communauté ukrainienne au Canada et comment elle veut aider et comment toute la communauté ukrainienne au Canada veut aider ses familles et ses amis. On est prêt de faire ça. Le Canada est prêt de faire ça. Les Canadiens sont prêts. On doit avoir un plan pour aider. With that, I want to welcome Bodhana to provide her story and talk about what it's like on her end and the support that she wants to see. Bodhana, thank you so much for joining us. And if you can just unmute, the mic is now yours.
Thank you very much, Jagmeet, for inviting me to tell the story. I'm originally immigrated from Ukraine, from the capital city Kiev 10 years ago, and I'm in constant contact with my classmates, with my relatives and family who still stayed in Kiev despite of the war. So about 10 days ago, the bombing started, and people started to find the places to secure themselves. They sleep in the underground subway. They can't go to the store because they can be killed. So, and even getting out of the city is very complicated right now. So, and one day I got up in the morning, like it was the third day of war, and I received a message from my uncle asking to take my cousin to Canada in any possible ways that I can. So of course I agreed to do that and try to support her as much as possible. The same day they put her on the train. Her mother was crying because she was sending her only child somewhere. She doesn't know where she ended up. We were not even thinking about as a visa requirements at that point, because the idea was to get her out from the war situation as far away as possible. So I helped my cousin to get the accommodation in Lviv, to have the night stay. Then she passed the Polish border, and currently she's in Poland, in Lublin, awaiting for the decision for her visitor visa application. So as an immigration practitioner and having the license in immigration, I know exactly how to put the application to make it more successful and to avoid refusals. But knowing her situation, that she's a young girl of 20 years of age, and without basically employment, without a good ties to the country of her residence, in normal situations, this application can be refused. So I'm very stressed out with that, while all of the efforts that I put towards getting my cousin from Kiev to Poland can be diminished just because of the refusal of the visa application. Also, we experience a lot of hardship in even putting together the visa application. First of all, the application forms are not accessible. They are secured and they are not accessible through the cell phone. And this is the only thing that she had while fleeing her hometown. So she doesn't have a notebook. So I helped her with the applications, but to sign them, it was a hardship, additional hardship, just to find the printer in the way of her road to Poland. Also, we have a lot of hardship with biometrics, because Polish Warsaw visa office is overwhelmed. There is no way to book the appointment quickly. So the wait time is about 2 weeks. My cousin spent a whole day from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. near the Warsaw Visa Application Center, trying to give her biometrics to comply with the visa requirements, but she was not able to do that. So instead of that, we booked her biometrics in Berlin. So she should travel as a minor, like by herself, to Berlin to do that, to comply with the requirements. And after that, I'm just praying that her visa application will be approved and she will be able to get safe to Canada. And I will be able to provide her with any accommodation and support that I can. So this is my personal story, but as I told you, as an immigration professional, I can tell you a lot of other stories. I have some people who are in Kharkiv, and this is a city where currently the bombing doesn't stop. There is no green corridor to get out. And we are putting the applications for visitor visa for those people, but they can't risk their life to get out of the country just to do biometrics, and got refused, because biometrics is required at the time when application just submitted, and after biometrics is completed, the processing starts. And a lot of people are just not able to do that. Just because they need to flee out of Ukraine to comply with this requirement. Also, there is a huge issue with obtaining all the required documents. government sites are not working properly right now. There is no way to get the employment letters or anything else. And basically, it's extremely impossible to overcome the biggest refusal for the visitor visa application is to return into your country of residence, because one of the criteria of visa application processing is to prove that an individual or an applicant will leave Canada within the prescribed timelines and will return to the country of residence. Unfortunately, for those people, in majority of cases, there is no even place to return. I'm in contact with my classmates, and a lot of them were living close to Kiev city in the townhouses. And that area got bombed, and basically 80% of houses are destroyed. So people like me with young families, with young kids, flew out the country just in the sleepwear. And they're currently in Poland, hoping for a better life and for the better future for their children. But they know that there is no home to return. There is no apartment, house, or anything that they can go back to Kiev right now. And they're not sure if their visa application will be approved. And it is, while Canada has the biggest Ukrainian community in the world and is hoping and to accept those fleeing Ukraine right now, there is so little assurance that those Ukrainians can get to Canada due to various of reasons and the complicated visa application process.
Thank you so much, Bodhana. You've explained the fear, the worry, and the complicated process right now. And that's a process that just can't continue. We need to make sure people can get here, that people like your cousin can get to Canada safely and in a simple and a straightforward way. And what you've described is nothing like simple and straightforward. It's so complicated and so difficult. We've got to change that. We've got to do our part. I thank you so much, Bodhana, for sharing. We're also joined by Lilia, and Lilia is going to share her story. Like many Ukrainian Canadians, these are stories of individuals, but these are stories of so many people. The fear, the worry, and the reality of what's going on the ground. These are things that people are experiencing, and it's another reason why we need to do everything we can to help. Lilia, thanks so much for joining us. And Lilia, please share your story.
Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Lilia, and I am director of the Ukrainian Canadian Council, Alberta Provincial Council. I would like to share my story, and I just wanted to start that today is the 12th day of the war, and until today's day, we have over 1.5 million people crossing the border, and unfortunately, my mother-in-law was one of them. She is a 66-year-old woman that she had to leave her country, and we asked her to leave on the third day of the war. So it was very difficult to get a transportation from the village where she is at to Lviv. And at Lviv, she took a bus straight to Poland. The typical journey that takes 2 to 3 hours was over 35 hours. The only comfort for us at that time, we knew that she departed and she was on a bus. So we could connect with a station in Poland where she's supposed to arrive to find out the time, if she did arrive or not. Cell phone connections were quite interrupted. Some messages or even phone calls didn't go through. What she shared with us, like for her, it was uncomfortable to be in the bus, even though she is a senior, because she saw hundreds of people walking, and mainly those people were females with small children. So people were on the lineup for 3 days to get across the border. A lot of them at night times, they knocked on the door of the bus and they asked if passengers from the bus could have taken kids to the bus because it's warmer. So my mother-in-law, in her journey, she had multiple kids given to her throughout the nighttime, and they were sleeping on her. People were in the hallway on the bus, laying on the floor and resting, because some of them, they were walking hundreds of kilometers. Also, I have a very close friend of mine that here in Edmonton, they are trying to get their nephew, and he came from Zaporizhia, and you know what happened there, like it was a nuclear threat a couple of days ago. He is a 17-year-old boy. He left by himself because we asked him, like his community from Edmonton asked him to go. He left grandmother with a mother in the house because grandmother is 90 years old. She can't walk and there is nobody to look after her. When he got to Poland, that journey took him 4 days. And he never traveled before. He is by himself. He got to the Polish embassy. Family in Edmonton applied for a visa. He is waiting for his biometrics. It's completely difficult, as Bodhana mentioned, because the system is overwhelmed with booking. You have to wait at least for 10 days to get in. And I know we talked to you about this last week, that it would be great to get conditional biometrics approval, at least if we cannot remove the visas for Ukrainian citizens, because when people apply to get a visa and their application reviewed prior to ask for biometric, at least they know that if everything fine with the biometrics, they're gonna get that visa. And for us, like for Canadian citizens, it's extremely devastating and it's difficult to understand. If we have all of the financial means to support those people that we want them to come here, our family and friends, we can show all of the documentation, we provide the letters like T4s, like financial support to people to visit, and we have to wait for weeks. We really want a lot of people to understand that Ukrainians fleeing the war right now, they actually at this time, they are risking their life because from the cities they go, they live and they leave the cities, like there is active fighting going on. And right now, a lot of the fighting is like threats as a civilians, unfortunately. Green corridors didn't work out, as we know from the news yesterday. They were created, but they're not working out with the Russians. So we are asking for your continuous support because our community is huge. We have over 1.4 million Ukrainians in Canada. Province of Alberta has 350,000 people. They identify themselves as Ukrainians through our conference. And we get like a lot of phone calls from various people that they want to get their families in here. Maybe a little difference between different refugee groups and Ukrainians, that people who are mainly asking to come to Canada right now, they're females and kids. And I'm not sure if you can help with this, but a few requests we got, it was that Canada, one of the requirements is to provide a letter from a parent that the child can travel overseas. And we as community, we don't know what to do if the father is fighting right now and he cannot provide his location, not even talking about going to the notary office or to the lawyer to provide a letter to let the child outside of the country. So maybe if you can help us with figuring that out as well, that would be really great.
Thank you so much, Lilia. You really, just like Bodhana, really provided so many chilling stories of a mother, 90 years old, grandmother who can't leave her home because she can't walk, and a 17-year-old boy having to leave for the first time, walking for 4 days. These are the stories of war. This is the cost, the terrible cost of war. And this is why we have to step up and provide all the help possible. We are calling today for two really specific things. One, a plan, a clear plan, so that people like Bodhana, people like Lilia, don't have to worry about their loved ones, their family, and their friends not being able to make it to Canada. We need a plan where we work at the federal level with provinces and territories to ensure that we can bring people to Canada safely, securely, and easily. It can't be complicated. It has to be barrier-free. We have to bring people to Canada so they can resettle here and be safe. Many people need safety for the short term. Some people will need to stay. We have the resources here. We've heard from two members of the Ukrainian community. We know the Ukrainian community is willing to step up. We know that Canadians in general are willing and ready to step up to welcome people here, to provide support and shelter. We need to do our part. And we are, again, continuing to apply pressure to do everything we can to stop this war. And so those sanctions that we've seen announced today were a welcome sign, but we need to see more pressure applied on Putin to end this war. I want to thank Bodhana and Lilia once again for being here and sharing your stories. It's so important for people to hear what it's like for people on the ground and what it's like for Ukrainian Canadians who are just worried every day about their loved ones and their friends and their family and worried about them not being able to get here to safety. Thank you for sharing that. With that, I'll pass the mic back to Melanie Richer, who will take any questions that the media might have.
Thank you, Jagmeet. Merci, Jagmeet. We will now go to questions. If you have a question, please use the function raise your hand. You will have one question and one follow-up. Merci, Jagmeet. On va maintenant passer aux questions. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction « Levez la main ». Vous allez avoir une question et un suivi. Première question, Mylène Crête de la presse.
Oui, bonjour. J'aimerais savoir, Monsieur Singh, est-ce que le Canada devrait avoir une cible, un nombre de réfugiés ukrainiens qu'il aimerait accueillir? On l'a fait pour les réfugiés syriens, on l'a fait, il y avait une cible aussi pour les réfugiés afghans. Si oui, quelle devrait être cette cible?
Merci pour la question. Dans ce moment, c'est vraiment une situation sans précédent avec les nombres des gens qui ont quitté l'Ukraine à ce moment. Je pense que c'est maintenant presque 1,5 million de personnes. Donc, c'est un nombre énorme dans seulement 12 jours. C'est vraiment une crise énorme. Deuxièmement, on est dans une guerre active et donc le nombre de gens qui ont quitté les pays dans une guerre qui continue, on doit faire tout ce qu'on peut. Donc, avec une cible, je pense que c'est difficile d'avoir une cible à ce moment parce que la crise continue. On n'a pas une vraie visage à ce moment de l'impact total de ce qui se passe, mais on doit faire tout ce qu'on peut à ce moment, maintenant, pour créer un système qui est facile et simple et efficace pour les Ukrainiens qui veulent quitter les pays. Une cible qu'on peut penser, on a une communauté ici des Canadiens d'origine ukrainienne qui sont prêts à accueillir leurs familles et leurs amis. Donc, on a une grande volonté des gens d'accueillir leurs familles et leurs amis. Donc, on doit s'assurer, on doit essayer d'utiliser cette volonté qui est là et de faire tout ce qu'on peut dans cette crise qui existe.
J'aimerais savoir également, vous parlez de lever les visas d'un processus simplifié. Le gouvernement a annoncé un processus simplifié la semaine dernière là, pour les Ukrainiens qui voudraient venir temporairement au Canada. Et je me demandais en quoi est-ce que ce processus-là ne vous satisfait pas et ça changerait quoi exactement de lever les visas pour quelqu'un qui doit faire sa demande à partir de la Pologne?
Plus de ça, oui, on est d'accord avec un processus sans barrière. On a entendu les histoires des gens qui attendent dans les autres pays. Ils attendent le processus pour arriver au Canada. Donc, ce n'est pas un système qui a du sens quand on a des gens qui est dans une situation de péril, dans une situation de précarité, et les gens qui sont maintenant dans un autre pays et veulent arriver au Canada, et ils ont des familles au Canada. Donc, le processus maintenant, et ça prend trop de temps. Ça, c'est le problème. Et on veut accélérer le système. Mais plus en édition, je peux dire, en édition d'un processus sans barrière, sans visa, on a besoin d'un plan et un plan clair en travaillant avec les autres provinces et territoires. Un plan comme ce qu'on a vu avec la crise en Vietnam. Dans ce temps, on a eu un plan avec les provinces et territoires pour accueillir les gens et pour aider les gens de stabiliser au Canada. Donc, ça, c'est quelque chose qui nous manque à ce moment, un plan comme ça, un plan avec les provinces et territoires pour s'assurer que les gens peuvent arriver, peuvent avoir les études nécessaires d'être stables au Canada et de connecter avec leur famille. Donc, on demande un plan et un processus qui est plus accéléré parce qu'à ce moment, on a entendu des exemples, ça prend trop de temps pour arriver au Canada.
Next question, we will go to Lahari Nanda from the Canadian Press.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Hi, Mr. Singh. Based on stories we heard from Bodhana and Lilia, we've found that a lot of non-citizens of Ukraine are being left out of immigration policy, especially in Canada. And Canada's immigration policy right now doesn't offer the same protection. Yet the immigration minister's office has policies made with equal accessibility in mind. You mentioned a plan for changing this. What would such a plan look like?
Well, the plan has to work with provinces and territories, and it has to address these concerns that we've seen. We haven't seen a federal coordinated plan with the provinces and territories. What we're seeing is some announcements around improving the process, some announcements around making sure people can get here, but we're not seeing really a coherent and a cohesive plan, and a plan that addresses some of the situations that Bodhana and Lilia have laid out. So we need that to be addressed. Specifically with vulnerable communities, we need to acknowledge that vulnerable communities are having a harder time leaving the country, can't get across the border, and that there's some vulnerable communities that can't, like the LGBTQ community and racialized communities, that are just finding it very difficult right now, and they're not getting the support they need. So the plan has to include an acknowledgement that there are some people that are even more vulnerable, that are unable to get across the border, and they need to have support. What we can do is make it clear that neighboring countries have to accept everyone that's leaving the country, that they can't stop some people that are trying to get to safety, and that should not happen. And we've seen reports of that happening. Anyone who is trying to get away from this crisis, get away from this serious, the war and the horrible costs of it, have to be able to get to safety. And we cannot allow for any barriers or any limitations on people who are trying to get out of the country.
All right. Based on that, then, what do you think about the fact that Canadian immigration right now counts nationality in deciding who is considered a legitimate refugee, especially in times of crisis like right now?
Yeah, we need to change that in terms of nationality, and to make it a clear topic or clear definition about people who are vulnerable. People in Ukraine right now are clearly vulnerable. Their situation is a situation of vulnerability. So if we apply a lens of vulnerability, who is at higher risk, who is challenged, and who is facing a serious threat, that can acknowledge the fact that it's Ukrainians right now that are facing a very serious threat, war, bombing, civilians being targeted, as was mentioned by Bodhana and Lilia. There is no real safe path for civilians to evacuate. Those green corridors were attacked and civilians were gunned down. People trying to leave their homes were killed. And so we know that this is a vulnerable community. Amidst that, there are also additional vulnerable communities that are even more at risk and are faced with even higher barriers or challenges to leave the country. That has to be acknowledged. So I think assessment based on the vulnerability and the challenges the challenges that they have to overcome, that's something that would help us address the real needs.
So I don't see any other questions at the time. So we will go back to you, Jagmeet.
Thanks so much. Again, I just want to really thank Bodhana and Lilia. It takes a lot of courage to share your story, in national media, that let people know what you're going through, and that your stories are the stories of so many Ukrainian Canadians and so many people in this country who want to help out and who are watching the system and saying it's just not responding fast enough. People are still unable to get here. We're going to continue to fight to make sure we do everything we can to support people in Ukraine, to make sure we continue to apply pressure on Putin, and that we put an end to this war and we welcome people to safety and security here in Canada. This is something that we can do, and we are ready to do that, and we're going to continue to fight to make that happen. I just want to thank Bodhana and Lilia once again. A big thank you for being here.